Well, good evening. This time at the dining table with Bertron Hamill. Let's get into a different time of year. The fireplace is not being used. Last time I didn't even use it. I had the candle. But it seemed to be more practical this time to do it here. And my time schedule of my day seems to be more convenient. So, still got the pleasant aesthetic. This is welcome inside my home. And as I invite you in here with me in my cabin to get to read and listen to stories together. So, today I have a special feature. I'm pretty sure I've mentioned her before, but this story is a book by a Miss Erin Roach, my fiance to be exact. But she tells a beautiful story here, and she, as I was telling her about what I'm doing here with the channel and just reading stories and writing my book at the same time, and I offered to read some of her material if she would like, and she loved the idea. And she requested a read of this excerpt. Now, this story is called Doran the Wanderer. So it reads kind of like Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and the type of story that it is. Erin Roach has her own style of writing. It's a very sweet, very fluid style. Very easy to read. Children and young adults can read it very easily. Anyone else can enjoy it. I enjoy it. A lot of people enjoy it. But as any author, it can always use more attention. And so I'm going to read this for her. And this takes place in the setting where you have a young girl who is residing in a room as she was found and rescued from the sea, and she wakes up being cared for, and she's in this room. She doesn't know where she's at, and everything's just a mystery at this point. It's everything kind of like 20,000 Leagues, where you get to learn more about the setting. More you go into it, so the whole thing is like the slow door opening up to revealing more and more the mystery of everything you get to see and explore. So, and she's just now waking up and entering into that world, but we'll see how this goes. So, I probably would have stayed lost within the pages for much longer, but the sound of grating metal interrupted my pleasant reverie. Jumping to my feet, I dropped the book to the floor. The sound had not come from the door leading to the adjoining chamber. It had come from the one Hannah had obviously used to enter earlier. With a racing heart, I stood there, staring at the large metal door. However, no other sound came from it, and there was no movement that indicated anyone was going to enter. I retrieved the book and laid it on the table, never taking my eyes from the door as I did so. Then, with as much silence as I could manage on a floor of stone, I approached the door and laid my ear against it. The icy steel of metal made me flinch when it touched my skin. Everything in this place seemed cold. As best I could through something so solid, I listened, trying to discern through the slightest sound of life on the other side. With much patience, I continued this until it finally occurred to me that I should try and open the door. If it was locked, there was nothing lost in trying. If not, well, I would decide once I knew. Clenching and unclenching my hands to try and steady them, I took a deep breath, grasped the handle, and pulled. My surprise was boundless when the door silently swung open. For a brief moment, I thought that this meant I was not a prisoner and was free to go. In this bright flash of excitement, I stepped through the opening into a long, empty passageway. A quaking uneasiness replaced the jubilant feelings that had filled me seconds earlier. Standing in the middle of the passageway, I looked in both directions. As far as I could see, there was nothing but the same gray, polished rock that made up the two chambers I had been confined to. Even the structure was the same, rounded walls and ceiling with a flat, glass-like floor. More lamps, exact duplicates of the ones I had seen before, were embedded in these walls, stretching on until they were indistinct dots of light. The door of my chamber had been unlocked by someone or something. Yes, the thought of the phantom wanderer would insert itself into my mind, whether invited or not. What was I to do? The sensible choice probably would have been to return to my chamber and wait. However, I was young, frightened, and longed to find a way out of this prison. So, after several minutes of indecision, I chose to walk for a ways down the passage to my left. This I did, but not far enough to the side of my chamber door. In the event that a hasty retreat was needed, though the boots I wore were made of the softest material I had ever felt, this was not the case for what formed the soles of them. The materials was hardened leather, or something resembling it, and every step I took echoed up and down the passage. In my state of mind, I could not help but think of how it sounded like the footsteps of ghosts, maybe those whose place I had taken. Shaking my head in frustration, I forced myself to focus on my present task, finding a way out. However, I found nothing down the path I had chosen and turned back. I walked until I passed my chamber door and continued on until I reached a part of the passage that curved. Here I stopped. What was waiting for me around that bend? Should I continue? I had no friend to help me and would lose sight of my safe haven. I glanced back and then resolved to go forward. Going back would not help my plight, even though going forward might be dangerous. Breathing out a quiet prayer to God, I cautiously stepped around the bend. My expectation was that I would see an extension of gray rocks and lamps when I ventured further. However, what I saw was that there were breaks in the walls along this portion. Doors, identical to the ones I had already seen, were scattered up and down the passage. This warranted more caution on my part. I did not know who might be inhabiting these rooms or where the occupants might be. I neared the first floor and saw that it was slightly open, flattening myself against the wall. I listened for a moment and then risked taking a look inside. There was no one within, not a sound, not a movement. On looking back, I was quite foolish to go inside, but with the curiosity of youth, I did just that. Stepping inside, I found myself in a sewing room of sorts. Neatly folded tunics, similar to my own, were on a table behind the door. I picked up one of these, and that was dyed a deep green, and found it to be of immense breadth through the chest. Only a man could wear something like this. I replaced it exactly as I found it, and let my gaze travel over the rest of the room. Pieces of cloth and the cutouts of various clothes of different sizes and colors were arranged on separate tables. It would take several people to complete the amount of work that lay before me. The sudden realization that these same people might return at any moment caused me to turn in haste so that I would not be caught. As I turned, my right knee caught the edge of a low stool. On this stool was a square container, sectioned off and each section filled with buttons, needles, scissors, and other necessary tools. With a tremendous noise, container, contents, and stool all clattered to the floor. If it had just been the room that the noise reverberated through, then there would have been no chance of anyone hearing it. The bolts of cloth that lined the walls would have muffled the sound. However, I had left the door open, just as I had found it, and the sound echoed back at me from the passage beyond. Jumping over the objects that now lay scattered on the floor and trying to avoid buttons that rolled across my path, I darted out the door. Not knowing if someone had heard the crash or how close they might be, I decided against exploring any more rooms, the ones I had came across that were open. I simply stopped long enough to ensure that there was no one inside. Then I continued on. For a long time, this is how my journey progressed, until I began to wonder why I had not come across any living thing. I had passed chambers that suggested the presence of someone a short time before, a type of stove with cooking on the top, a room where fish were being cleaned, etc., but of actually living creatures, I had not seen a one. Breathless and weary, I stopped to rest for a few minutes. Leaning against one side of the passage, it was then that I realized how thirsty I was. This was a fine place to begin craving water. The only possible place to find this was in what I assumed was the kitchen. But I had passed that a good while ago, and to go back was to risk being found out. No, I had to go ahead and hope that I found water further on. I pushed myself off the wall. I became aware of a sound that I had wandered about, but was still surprised to hear. From somewhere ahead of me came the murmur of voices. Not wanting to be heard, I slipped off my boots and crept towards the sound. The stone beneath the bare feet was so cold that it felt like my feet were burning. Silence was more valuable to me than warmth at that moment, so I continued as I was. I walked a good ways, still passing unoccupied rooms, until I saw the passage ahead was widening. The voices were growing louder, and I gently set my boots down so that I could be unhindered as I went forward. Crouching low, I used the balls of my feet and my hands to move towards the voices. There wasn't much cover when I got to the end of the passage, so I got to my feet and pressed my back against the wall. Craning my neck, I looked around the bend and was shocked at what I saw. There were maybe a dozen people moving about in a large chamber with a ceiling so high that I could not see the top. Even the densely places lamps fell to light up the blackness above. However, it was the people that really held my attention. They were of all different races. Most of them were men, but there were no young people. Several of the men were gray-headed, yet still physically strong and able. The few women that I saw had dark hair with gray slowly gaining on their dark tresses. None of them saw me right away. All were too busy moving baskets and bundles around. Around this chamber were situated different openings leading to the other passages. I assumed from these people would come carrying burdens and deposit them in the middle of the chamber. Others would then take and start sorting the contents. As I watched this activity, a woman suddenly stood up from behind a stack of crates. It was Hannah. In an unconscious movement, I pulled back a little as if she could see me. She cocked her head as if listening for something or someone. I noticed that when she did this, the activity of the room slowed almost to a stop. Without any reason, I held my breath and felt my heart skip a beat, as if there was an impending doom approaching me. I waited, frozen like a statue, hoping that it would pass me by. Hama turned her head towards the tunnel that lay directly to the right of the one I was in. "Doran is back," was all she said. And that concludes our reading for this time. Hope you enjoyed that. That is a reading from, what chapter is that? Yeah, chapter 6 of Doran the Wanderer by Miss Erin Roach. And so I would like to take a moment to promote my own work as well. So as you may recall from early on in the channel, I am also an author, and I have written The Reckoning of Olote, Ocnarin Book One. Now, The Reckoning of Olote is a series, and it's always challenging to speak of it in some sense because it's different from most other stories you read. So it's there's a multi-layer of narratives in the storytelling of The Reckoning of Olote. And to be specific, there are 2 layers. There's the Ocnarin, and then there are going to be layers that tell phrase. And I'll explain that. So basically, The Reckoning of Olote is a Christian epic fantasy, but it is an ambiguous tale, so it's also simply just an epic fantasy, however you prefer it. The symbolism is there, but it's an ambiguous tale, so you can read it however you prefer that, from within its own in-world experience. So, The Reckoning of Olote as a whole is simply telling the story of the world of Olote. I mean, it really is as simple as that. However, that opens it up to being very complex in terms of the multi-layer of narratives at play. So it ends up becoming more of a saga. Even the Ocnarin alone, Book One, is itself a saga, as you would, as it is telling an historical narrative and saga across the chapters as mortals pursue hope and grace amidst trials of corruption and tyrannies, betrayals, and many other things, as a Dark Lord, Korra, seeks to wreak havoc of them. It's a story of redemption. It's a story of many things. There are many tropes involved. Across the chapters, you will be reading many stories told as major events take place over the time and age of Olote. And this is the first entry for that. This is the Ocnarin Book One. There will hopefully be 2 more. Ocnarin Book Two, Book Three. The Ocnarin Book One does tell its own complete set of events. So it is its own complete story in that sense. So I will be releasing these as I develop them. I do have quite a bit already kind of half-baked, ready to go already alongside with this. Considering it took me a while to really decide on when I was ready to want to publish anything, and I was really trying to establish exactly what I wanted it to be. So of course, it's not exactly the original format I had intended for release. But I won't go into that. That's just not necessary. It's more of a special features deal, maybe someday in the distant future. So that's the Ocnarin. Simply telling the story of Olote in that sense, as a history, as it tells the major events. A lot of heroes, a lot of tropes. I think anyone should be able to find it fascinating. And as far as the style of reading, you might say it's akin to Tolkien's Middle-earth in some respect, in scale as well as somewhat of the writing style in some degree. I really appreciated his prose and narrative in that respect. In that case, it is my own style as well. It is different. So don't get me wrong. It's not just a repeat of Tolkien. It's my own thing. And Lewis was also inspirational in other means, especially where certain symbolisms, how he was able to convey them was concerned. And when it comes to certain lighthearted storytelling, which isn't necessarily much the case in this book. That's going to be more seen in some of the till phrase that come out. So till phrase, what do I mean by till phrase? I'm talking about stories and poetry that are told that tell there's specific stories that take place within the time frame of the Ocnarin. So I'm more looking at a closer look at the perspectives of the people's lives and the lore. Even it takes a closer look at the lore as well. And so one layer tells the history, the Ocnarin. The till phrase tell the legends and the life experiences of the people and the general, while taking a closer look at the lore in this world. So the whole world is very lore deep with lore, and it's lore heavy. Excuse my stuttering. And so I have. So what I have coming right now? I have a Tilfrey of the Wandering Sun. Is the name of the next one in editing. That one will be a novella in size, and it'll be hopefully releasing this year. I also have a Tilfrey. I have other Tilfreys that are written. They're just not intended or ready for release at this time. Some stuff are like short stories, and some stuff are like small bits of poetry and things like that. So some things need to have more of a compilation of things to be ready to release. But there are other things like this novella that are larger in size that I can go ahead and do. So I'll figure this out as I go. I have many till phrase I want to do before I'm ready to go into working on the next Ocnarin. My voice sounds a little buggish at this point. I had a cold last week. I'm coughing still some this week, so I beg your pardon for any croaking going on in my voice right now if it doesn't sound right. I hope I managed well enough during the reading. I do want to pick back up in reading an excerpt out of here. Meantime, I will definitely encourage looking at the blurb I will give here on this video here and slide. And I would definitely encourage you to read that, and as well as I'll come up with a trope list. It's not exhaustive. It does have quite a list on there, but like I said, this is a stack of stories going on in this book. It's about a 400-page book and all, so keep that in mind. There's a lot going on, and there are a lot of tropes. So the trope list graphic I'll be in display here is really a sample trope list, to be exact. Anywho, as far as the other tropes you find in the book and all, you'll discover for yourself, and I'm excited to see what you will find and think, and I'd be love to hear people's thoughts about it as they read it. So I wanted to pick up back on chapter 6. I read chapter 6 the last time I did an excerpt, as we read simply about Doran and his life growing up in the island kingdom of Nundar, and their very sea-oriented culture. They were also a very oppressive culture, but he was one of the more noble hearts to grow up in that. And if you go back and listen to that, you get to understand a little more about him in that respect. Now I want to try something a little different here. I want to present this visual. This is chapter 6, and this is the illustration we have. This is an illustrated copy. This is the picture depicted by Adakin Nikita Burbiak from Ukraine. And prayers for him. He was called to, last I heard from him, he was being called to the war fronts in Ukraine, and I have not heard from him since, and that was a couple of years ago. So, and he was in the middle of a commission for me at the time that I'm afraid at this point I'll never get to see what his work was going to be. And I pray he's doing all right, but I mean, well, we'll see where the reality's at, but hope he's all right. But anyway, he did a beautiful job with this one. This is a depiction of the forest of Nodrin. Yeah, excuse me. Quite a few forests in this world, and some of them have a similar name, so I have to think for a moment. Excuse me. Yeah, this was the forest of Nodrin, and interesting enough, where we ended off on the excerpt of last reading is basically where I want to pick up with this one. Not simply because I want to pick it up from there, I simply want to read about this illustration. So, can we give a little context? Bill Dare and his group their ship had made berth at the Bay of Eldan, and he kind of had a colonization ongoing with the Kingdom of Nundar there. And they were having incidents where they were having to investigate why dark beasts, to be more specific, wolf and dark wolves were attacking and taking their men, or actually in this case, mortals are referred to as Elaith, or a lie in this sense. So they were attacking a lie. Difference in terms of Elaith and Lyra is a grammatical difference, not a definitional difference. Just so you're aware. And let's see, where's my page? Okay. So in length, their travels took them on the eve of a forest, as all of the given signs pointed to it. Beholding the forest was intimidating, for it conceived an enveloping darkness that seemed to persist in disregard to weather or time of day. The trees that took growth there were aged, twisted, and deformed, and they varied of dark willows, deep oaks, marred cedars, and many others that were far less delightful. Such was the discovery of the Nodran forest. Entering the forest was done reluctantly, yet they noticed that there was a sweet scent to the air. Rarely they moved in groups, and as they moved, the darkness took shape in their minds. There were now thoughts which stirred that led them to believe they were being enticed to be drawn in deeper. Here they soon learned that the forest harbored their troubles, as many diverse and odd beasts had occupied it. For all these creatures were predators, every one of them. Wolves prowled, large bats stalked the woodland ceilings, and there were many others of like repugnance. The most dreaded of these was the great spiders which lay their traps. The dawdling of their victims were greatly welcomed as they preyed upon them patiently in playing with their growing fear. Many of the exploring Eli of the area had fallen prey to these many horrors, and their carcasses were discovered by Bildare and his Eli. Their task was complete wherewith they would have report. But upon completion, it came to notice that some of their Eli were missing, and then others fell prey rather to their fear than to the given danger. These, in taking leave of their senses, fled on their own accord to not be seen, nor be heard from again. Before long, they found that their return route was cut off, as many of the creatures had swarmed on the excitement of the fleeing and bedreaded Eli. Falaris was desired to take search of the forest's heart and reach a better understanding of what mysteries lay behind its story. But Bildare would not concede to this, as they had accomplished their task, and he was concerned with the welfare of the Eli, as he knew they were not prepared of such a feat. Nevertheless, Falaris was determined, and took it upon himself in his vainglory to go. Yet most of Falaris's Eli followed Bildare rather. For as Bildare had pointed out, their task had been done, whereas they were not constrained to go further. The fleeing Eli in drawing a swarm provided enough of a diversion, wherefore Bildare escaped upon the northern marches of Nodran, with 7 Eli that were left in following him, including the Eli of Falaris. And Falaris and those who followed him were never heard from again. So, that pretty much reads about the forest and it moves on from there. Anyway, that is the forest that Attican had depicted in the scene. I hope you enjoyed hearing me read about it. So, I would love to hear your thoughts. What did you think of the reading? And, excuse me. If you have any interest in this story, then please go look up Reckoning of Olote, Ocnarin Book One. Both books in this reading today, Doran the Wanderer and The Reckoning of Olote, are available on Amazon, if you are interested. I hope you appreciated this, and I appreciate you for taking your time in the day to come pull up a chair and sit with a glass of tea or coffee, whichever you prefer to enjoy, and listen to a good story. All right. Well, this is Bertron Hamill, and may you have a good day.